I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and this is Talking TV, our weekly video podcast. Today I'm joined by Johnny Green, the president and GM of WCBS in New York, and Sarah Burke, the VP and news director at the station. Now, there are always a million things going on at an O&O station in the country's biggest news market, but today we're going to zero in on just a few of them. The community reporting model that CBS has adopted across its stations, the local streaming channel, which was one of the earliest in the markets there, and how it's been doing and evolving, and how they are gearing up for a tumultuous news year ahead of the enormous pressures that every station is under, but perhaps no more so than in the New York market. We will be right back with that conversation. Talking TV is brought to you by Spot On by Futuri, your solution for creating instant audio spec commercials and scripts, along with topical and promotional production. We've all experienced that sinking feeling when the facts of a lead story change after your VO talent has left for the day. With Spot On, you can make needed updates in just a few minutes. Spot On can also help sales teams impress customers with an audio spec spot right at their desk. Learn more about the many ways your station can use Spot On by visiting futurimedia.com/solutions/spot on. Johnny Green and Sarah Burke, you are very welcome to Talking TV.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
To a greater or lesser extent, CBS-owned stations have been creating the position of community reporters in their markets. Essentially, it's a beat covering a neighborhood with the idea of building trust, building relationships in the community, and ultimately giving better, more relevant coverage. How widely are you doing this in New York?
Sarah, so I can start from a broader sense, from a station perspective. We assign journalists to geographical areas and beats. And what I can tell you is, since we made that commitment, it's kind of energized the entire station to be almost journalists across departments, because everybody takes pride in where they live and sharing news from that beat, being involved in community activities from that beat. I can toss it to Sarah, who can go deeper into how we do it specifically with our reporters here in the newsroom.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, our community reporting kind of takes several different forms at this point. So we have the reporters who live and work in community. So we have reporters who are I have a reporter in the Bronx, I have a reporter in Brooklyn, Queens, someone who specializes in Harlem. Those are the investments we've made to date. With other investments in the future, we'd love to have someone on Staten Island. We have folks who are in New Jersey, 2 reporters there. And what we feel like that investment gets us is really hyper-local reporting, but not just hyper-local as in, we're finding out about this story or that story, but the follow-up is, I think, a little bit more authentic and automatic. We are building real relationships with the people who, are, Jesse Mitchell in Harlem, or Elle McLogan in Queens, Hannah Klieger, who was born and raised in Coney Island and is getting good tips, is following up on stories and building a lot of trust in the community. Like you said, Michael, that's one of the community reporter investments we're making, but we're also, the entire station is investing in community through our Better Together campaign, which is really active all year round, but particularly around the holidays. We're doing our Season of Giving campaign. And that, I think, has helped the whole organization understand the importance of investing in community for all of us, not just reporters who are working a beat. And we'll be out on Saturday at several grocery store locations talking about food insecurity and things of that nature. So we have the reporters, we have Better Together, and we also just generally do internal efforts to kind of bring the station together too, which I think has been really meaningful.
So the one quick thing I would add is, the one thing that I think the newsroom's commitment, which spreads to the station, has, what I love about it is we're there to cover the stories that we have to cover that are not always fortunate, but we're also there to celebrate when things go well and to be partners, when things don't go well. I think that is the biggest payoff from what I see from this seat. So sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, you kind of actually getting to what I want to just follow up on with the community reporters. How are the communities that are being covered responding, and how are viewers more broadly responding to this structure? Is it something where you've had some concrete feedback so far to build from?
So we've gotten really positive feedback in the form of emails. I forget the story last year that we covered. I think it was a domestic violence kind of survivor event. We went there, I think it was in the Bronx. We spent the day, we covered the story, we talked to folks, and one of my news managers, her title is executive producer impacting community. And that's a role that was new to the station group when Wendy first came aboard. And it's been just such a valuable role to have in our newsrooms. She works with our community reporters to just kind of keep track of what they're working on, and also is engaging in some of these bigger station events. But anyway, she was the one who received this email from somebody who said, "I can't believe you showed up. You're never here to cover us for something good." And I'm not doing the email justice, because it was really just a beautiful sentiment that meant a lot to the newsroom. And I think it has that reinforcing effect. We want more of that. We want to be there for positive stories and make sure that we're shining a light on good things that are helping community, as much as we're there for the things that are certainly, become news coverage and are unfortunate stories.
Sure. I'm just curious about the implementation of this idea in New York, particularly because it's such a massive city and you have such giant populations even within neighborhoods. I mean, you could have a community reporter just in Astoria, Queens, or in Hell's Kitchen, or, you could divide it up in an even more granular way. You just have people covering essentially boroughs, it seems, at the moment, or in Harlem. Do you foresee kind of any allocation shift of more reporting resources into this model, significantly than you have now?
That's a good question. I think we'll continue to invest. Like I mentioned, we don't have someone on Staten Island just yet, but we do have 2 reporters on Long Island, and we have somebody in Westchester County. So we are geographically, we've deployed in a geographic way already, in addition to the people who are identified as specifically as community reporters. But we've also, Michael, talked a lot about specializing in a topic and developing more expertise in that way as well. So we have the geographic community, but then we also have community, an education community. We have people who are focusing on congestion pricing, which is such a huge issue here in the tri-state area. So we're also specializing reporters in a kind of a hybrid beat way that we think will really help our audience more deeply understand important issues to the viewers we're trying to serve.
Sure. Let's talk about streaming. CBS had one of the earlier and more robust local streaming channels, piggybacking initially off of CBS All Access. Now, flash forward a few years, and you've got these relatively mature streaming operations that I understand are quite successful. Their digital performance in all your markets, including New York. I know also that your morning blocks are particularly strong with traffic. But what can you tell me about the growth that you've had there, and how you're maturing that operation on streaming?
Yeah, Michael, thank you for that question. As you pointed out, we had the luxury to be in the first local streaming channel, local station in the country, and we did get a jump start as far as being out there, people knowing where we are. And what we've seen by the research is those morning hours were heavily viewed. So in the last year plus, we launched at 7 a.m. That was a streaming only to start. We recently, Sarah, 2 months ago, right? Launched at 8 a.m. Now both are simulcast also on WLNY channel 55, which is our, sister station. They'll simulcast. For example, the 7 a.m. the month of October alone got 7.5 million minutes watched. And it is certainly been a success. I think post-COVID, you see viewing habits change. So the commute might be different. So we're on through that 4:30 through later in the morning. So we've seen some success there. Sarah, anything you want to add about, kind of the content and what you guys have produced with Newswise?
Thanks, Johnny. It's been really heartening to see just that we're creating something that there is a big demand for, and to have some of the most successful streaming shows in the station group has been, I think, really rewarding for us. And so we're trying to build on that success with the 7 a.m. And we've launched the 8 a.m. as Johnny mentioned. Come December, it will be a full hour. And so we'll have a sizable morning block that starts at 4:30 in the morning on linear. Of course, we're simulcasting everything on stream. So we'll be on from 4:30 all the way till 10 a.m. With, I think, newscasts that not only serve our audience with weather and news, but we're really trying to create an experience for the viewer that allows them to stay as long as they want. You're not going to get something that feels like a wheel in the morning. You're going to get news, you're going to get weather, but we're also trying to incorporate newsmakers, especially into the 8 a.m. hour. Which is hosted by Chris Raggy, who's got excellent interviewer, and we're planning on having him lean into that when the show expands to the full hour. And then 9 a.m. is one of you can't say one of my favorite shows, but it is got a kind of so I have a soft spot for it because it's so much of what we're doing in the community, and that's another kind of leg of the stool of our community engagement, is to have this platform where we are celebrating community in such an intentional way. Cindy Shu is the perfect anchor for that show, joined by John Elliott, who does weather for us. But all of our community partners have a home in the 9 a.m. and it's just got an excellent warmth to it. And so, that's the streaming block that we're talking about when we talk about the shows that are really, I think, performing strongly for us.
And elsewhere, Sarah, do you find it's breaking news that's driving peak performance on the streaming channel, or are there other drivers?
Breaking news is a huge driver, absolutely. And that has been a learning curve for us. Not to say that we didn't anticipate that breaking news would drive people, but just how much it does. And we know that if we're not standing up excellent coverage during breaking news, we are missing a huge opportunity to serve our audience. They find us during breaking news. We've seen it with a crane collapse in Midtown, with the unrest in Union Square when Kai Cenat gave out the video games. It's millions and millions of minutes streamed. And, I'm kind of constantly amazed that people are so available to just start streaming us. And it's a real opportunity that energizes the whole newsroom.
And Johnny, what about advertisers there? Is it still largely, generally across the industry, it's largely programmatic advertising, but are you doing a lot more direct sold into this?
Yeah, it's a combo. You're right. It is more programmatic buys in the OTT space. But as we have these more added live hours that we can point people to, and as we see the minutes watched grow, we're certainly looking to kind of match the model that has worked for linear for many years. How does that translate to OTT? So that's certainly something that our sellers are out in the marketplace marketing when we see this growth, and what I'm happy about, what Sarah mentioned, is when we have those big breaking news events that translate to giving us a little bit more regular viewers, which is kind of the challenge from the sales space, but where we've seen some growth. After being there when people need us to be there, they'll come back perhaps when there wasn't a big breaker. So we've definitely seen some success and some growth there.
How's the learning curve with advertisers on streaming? Do they get it? Or some markets I've heard are harder than others to kind of explain it to people. Some advertisers get it right away. They see it's just like TV. They're very savvy to it. Others, it's harder.
Yeah, it's hit or miss. And, in New York is different to where, some agencies are used to it and they buy network. So being New York, that works. Some agencies not as used to it. And it's an explanation is calling out these positive stories that we see in our numbers and our growth, reinforcing that is what we're bringing to the community. And just the convenience of it, we're a big commuter place. So a commuter city. So people taking the train into the city, like we literally carry the story that way to advertisers, so they know that, there's not appointment. We're constantly on. We're 24/7. When it's breaking, we're there. And, slowly but surely, we see that they're coming around.
Sarah, in terms of creating the programming that is bespoke or original to streaming, how difficult has that been to work it into the workflows of the newsroom? It's another thing you have to do. I don't know how much you've staffed up to handle these additional streaming only hours or units, but has that been difficult to reconcile?
Well, I think yes and no. I have to give the newsroom a lot of credit because I've worked in several. They're all fantastic places, but this is a group of such driven, professional, probably type A people that you create a new mission and they'll achieve it. And frankly, usually in ways that I have not even imagined. We have just a great team here who has really embraced the challenge of streaming and more than just in a thing I've got to do, kind of like you're saying, you add another show, it's another thing, it's another drain on the newsroom, but that's not how streaming has been perceived. I don't think by the newsroom. I think it's viewed as the opportunity that it really is. And so there's a lot of excitement about it and a lot of people who are willing to pitch in. What I was talking about previously with the breaking news, we use the acronym or the SOS, stay on streaming. It helps us remember that even if we're stopping down because we're cutting in on linear, we got to stay on streaming. We got to super serve our audience. And that's a rallying cry for us to just make sure that we're thinking about serving the audience, whether it's with a chopper picture or a live reporter or information driven from the anchor desk. And I think it's a challenge that the newsroom has embraced and we all understand that it's important for our future to knock it out of the park.
And I should mention to viewers of this right now, if you want to learn more about CBS's streaming news strategy and how it's evolving, we have Sarhan Safernia, who is the group's SVP of streaming, on a panel on this very subject at our News Tech Forum conference in New York on December 12th. So register for that. Now, speaking of that conference, the overall theme of it this year is adapting to a culture of continuous crisis, which the industry finds itself needing to do now more than ever. And I wonder how you both are adapting yourselves. You're running one of the country's biggest local newsrooms in a city that doesn't ever have a moment of downtime on the best day. So let me put a finer point on that. Sarah, I'm wondering specifically here, how are you prepping for coverage in an upcoming election year that's going to see perhaps the most sharply divided electorate since the Civil War, and where the prospect of violence against your journalists, just as one baseline concern, is perhaps more higher than ever?
Thank you for that question. It's certainly something that Johnny and I talk a lot about and our senior leadership talks a lot about, because the concern that we have for our news gatherers in the field is it's real. And I will say that the safety concern is nonstop. Certainly the election coming up will intensify those conversations and those concerns, but it's always a concern. Things are different out in the public now. Even if it's not covering a very controversial story, we face aggressive people when we're news gathering, and it's difficult because I have a lot of veteran reporters, veteran photographers who tell me that I was out, somebody flipped me the bird or for no reason. So there's a lot of animosity just generally toward the media, which is really unfortunate. I'm sure your point about the upcoming election, it will escalate. We have lots of conversations about providing security for our teams and deciding if we really need to be live on a story. And any other thing we need to talk about is on the table for discussion. But what we're not going to do is stop covering the news. That is our commitment to our audience, and to do so with the same kind of integrity, accuracy, and context that we want to provide. But it can be really tough.
Johnny, let me follow up on that with you. Because you're looking after the overall station too, and the building itself, and people. There's a threat of people coming in there with maybe bad intentions. What are you having to put in place for contingencies now that maybe you didn't even have to think of a couple of years ago?
Um, no, I think Sarah spoke to some of it. What we didn't do a few years ago as much, I wouldn't say we never did it, but was the security with news crews specifically. It's not too many days go by that we don't consider it having that available. We're happen to be in a space where we share with our other CBS entities, CBS News, CBS Sports in the same building. We have constant conversations about this very thing and making sure that this entrance that or exit that may not have been covered before, that there's security all there. And I think Sarah also touched on something that we do is conversations, having the conversations with staff. How are they doing? I think in the news department in particular, we do a good job of, okay, I've covered this story, this terrible story for 2 days. I need a break from that. Let's reassign you to something else. Another thing I've done station-wide is, working with Sarah, is bringing in experts and people that can talk, media psychologists. Dr. Donald Grant, we've had in several times to talk, have listening sessions, hear people out where managers are not necessarily in those conversations. So they can get the necessary tools they need to mentally do the job and, just having conversations. How are you feeling out there? I've had a incident where I wore a CBS hat and somebody, and I wasn't covering the story. I was walking down the street and someone, yelled out something to me. So I know it happens. So it is, how do we conversate? We're not, we're places where me and Sarah aren't out in the field covering. We want to hear from them. What are they dealing with? And making sure they have the proper resources across the board to, do their job.
I would add too, I'm sorry, Michael. I just wanted to add that a little bit of an antidote to this is community reporting. And certainly the trust we're building by being in the boroughs, by being in community. It's really hard to say something mean to somebody who you see at the grocery store, and somebody you've built a rapport with, or somebody who you've sent an email to and they followed up and helped you get your problem solved. It's not, of course, a full solution, but we do take hope from that because we see those relationships as a future, and as something that can help us kind of on a dark day feel good about what we do, because we know we still have a lot of power to help people and shine a light on problems. And so that helps me when we have some of the more negative, issues pop up. I think a lot about community.
When you are sending crews out into stickier situations, are they sort of less branded, maybe with CBS, caps or jackets, or your cameras maybe smaller? Are you thinking about sort of the crew drawing less attention to itself as one of the safety precautions?
That's certainly part of the kind of toolkit. Yes, we don't necessarily roll in a marked vehicle.
Yeah. Just last, so many parts of this question we could get to, but what do you both think are the stakes for local news in this coming year?
Johnny?
Yeah, I'll take it first. I think we, as local news, I've, been at 9 TV stations. The stakes couldn't be higher with, you talked about it at the top, the wars going on right now, the election year coming up. We all read the credibility and the issues that media as a whole has faced in recent times. And I think, local news, not as much as some national outlets, I think is more important now than ever for us to be that voice, to report unbiased and be essential to our viewers, that we have that information. And as I said earlier, we're a partner. When things don't go well, we want to be there and be a partner and help it be better. When things are going well, we want to be there and help celebrate. I think this year and not even mention the economy itself. So with all those things happening, it is more important now than ever for us to be an advocate, the voice for our consumers.
I couldn't say that better.
We could get into all sorts of subsets of this question and be here for a long time, but you are both very, very busy people and you need to get back to it. So I want to thank you, Johnny Green and Sarah Burke, for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. You can catch past episodes of this podcast at tvnewscheck.com or on our YouTube channel. And we're back most Fridays with a new episode. See you next time. Talking TV is available to watch on tvnewscheck.com. You can also watch and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.